Hi, I'm Gwen. My parents gave me a waitstaff badge at my brother's celebration party I helped fund, powered by my company's technology. I walked in as family, and they handed me a job. Not a seat, not a thank you, a badge. But what hurt more than the badge was realizing it wasn't a mistake. It was the plan all along. How do you stay silent when they erase you from the family, but still profit off your work? And what happens when the one they overlooked is the one holding the contract? Let me tell you what I did. The driveway of River Oaks Mansion shimmered in the early evening haze. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than I meant to as the valet stepped up to my window. I gave him a short nod, took one last look at Colton through the rearview mirror, and forced a smile. "Ready?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He shrugged, trying to sound casual. "It's just another party, right?" I envied how easily kids could pretend. For me, this wasn't just a party. This was another test, another quiet audition for a role I was told I didn't fit. The double doors opened into a world trimmed with white roses, gilded candle holders, and carefully curated music meant to sound effortless. It was elegance designed to scream old money, but not in an obnoxious way, of course. My heels clicked against the marble, echoing in ways that made me feel like an imposter, even though I helped fund this damn event. At the check-in table, a young woman handed me a white envelope. My name was written in perfect calligraphy. That part made me pause for a second until I opened it. Inside, a plastic badge. Waitstaff Food and Beverage Logistics. I blinked, then blinked again. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they mixed me up with the catering crew. My name was spelled correctly, though. Not a smudge, not a typo. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "I think this was placed in the wrong envelope." The woman glanced at my name tag, then at her iPad. She hesitated, then smiled. "I was told to give this one to Ms. Shipman directly." I didn't argue. Not yet. I stepped aside and pulled out my phone. RSVP? Confirmed. Donation receipt? Emailed? Dress code? I was wearing it. This wasn't an error. This was deliberate. I found my mother near the grand staircase, holding court like she always did, posture perfect, pearls sharp against her navy dress. She saw me before I said a word. "What's wrong?" she asked, voice low, smile still plastered on for the socialites beside her. I held up the badge. This was in my envelope. She gave it a glance, barely a second. "Oh, that. Don't make a fuss, Gwen. It's your brother's night." I waited. That was it? No explanation? No apology? "I'm not waitstaff, Mother." "You're not being treated as staff," she replied quickly, eyes darting. "We just didn't want confusion. You've always been hands-on with events. People might naturally assume you're helping. Besides, you're good at making things run smoothly." I stared at her, unsure which part insulted me more. "I RSVP'd as family." "You are family," she said, finally lowering her voice to something close to a whisper. "But we have to keep things clean. Cameron's announcement tonight is sensitive. Investors, image, you understand. Just wear it for the family." Then, without asking, she reached forward and straightened the badge on my chest. Like it belonged there. There was no public scene. That's not how I handle humiliation. I nodded once, turned, and walked straight into the reception hall with that badge burning against my skin. The hall was loud with laughter and clinking glasses, but no one looked at me directly. A few staff glanced at the badge and gave small nods. I'd become one of them. I was now part of the background. I moved between the tables, catching phrases, Cameron's name, praise, anecdotes about his vision. No one mentioned my company. No one asked what Nexus had done for the real-time logistics of this event, because no one was supposed to know. There was a time I believed my achievements would speak for themselves. When I was 16, I built my first prototype for a temperature-sensitive delivery tracker and showed it to my father at dinner. He told me it was cute. That word echoed in my ears now as I passed the buffet, where servers polished empty glasses. One nodded at me, hesitated, then asked, "You here to help with the champagne?" I almost answered, "Almost." Instead, I moved toward the far wall, away from the noise. My eyes scanned the room like I was preparing a report. Who was sitting where? Who had said what? Who looked away when I approached? I had no seat at the family table, no name in the slideshow preview running on the stage screens. But I had my presence, and I was documenting everything. Colton found me near the bar. "Is it okay if I grab a soda?" I nodded, touched his shoulder. "Stick close, all right?" He nodded, unaware of the storm rising behind my calm expression. Marcus hadn't arrived yet. "Traffic," he said. Or maybe it was fate keeping him away long enough for me to absorb this night without a buffer. I took a glass of water and sipped slowly. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't walk out. Not yet. I would stay. I would observe. And when the moment came, I would not raise my voice. I would raise the stakes. That night, I didn't sleep. I drafted a letter that made silence into a sound they couldn't ignore. The words were clinical, calculated, and legally binding. This time, I wasn't playing defense. I stood near the perimeter of the ballroom, watching as the show continued without missing a beat. Glasses clinked, laughter layered the room like white noise, and in the center of it all sat Cameron beaming, composed, perfectly propped next to Zinnia. Her dress was a shade too bright for the occasion, the color of champagne with just enough shimmer to catch the light. She looked good, I'll give her that. Confident. Belonging. Cameron leaned into her whisper with the same kind of intimacy that used to belong to me. Once. I hadn't seen Zinnia in years. We hadn't parted on bad terms exactly, but we hadn't stayed friends either. When I told my family about her, my mother said it was just a phase. My father didn't speak to me for 6 days. When we broke up, they nodded, as if some silent prophecy had been fulfilled. Now here she was, flanked by chandeliers, and blessing my brother with the same smile she once saved for me. She didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, when her eyes met mine across the crowd, she tilted her head slightly and smiled. Soft. Polished. The kind of smile that said, "You're no longer part of this picture." And I believed her. A light flickered on near the stage. Cameron tapped a glass gently with his wedding ring. "If I can have your attention for just a moment," he said, voice amplified. "Easy. Tonight isn't just about the food or the music or even this gorgeous venue. It's about legacy." I stayed rooted by the bar. The screen behind him came to life, displaying a photo of our father shaking hands with a mayor. Then Cameron as a child, holding a ribbon at his first school election. Shots of him at charity golf tournaments, posing with clients, building sites lit up in gold hour sunlight. Our mother next to him at the ribbon cuttings. Even Everett, our father, standing next to blueprints. And then nothing. No graduation photo from MIT, no clips from the Forbes panel I was on. Not a trace of Nexus, the company that was powering every damn system in this very room. Just Cameron, posing in rooms he never built, holding visions he didn't draft. The applause erupted like clockwork. I sipped my drink slowly, not blinking. Someone behind me said, "That's leadership," and another replied, "Has exactly like Everett was at that age." I turned and walked toward the hallway, down the carpeted corridor that led to the restrooms. Inside, I found an empty stall and shut the door. No tears. Not anymore. Just silence. I leaned against the metal divider, pulled out my phone, and opened a saved file. It was the TEDx video from last fall, my talk on innovation in real-time systems. The thumbnail showed me mid-sentence, gesturing with intent. I hit play, watched 10 seconds, then stopped. They didn't forget me. They edited me out, and they expected me to keep clapping from the shadows. I returned to the ballroom just as Cameron stepped down from the stage. He was immediately surrounded investors, colleagues, admirers. Lorna and Everett joined him, all teeth and praise. Zinnia saw me again. She was standing next to them now, arms looped through Cameron's, her presence seamless. When our eyes met this time, she didn't look away. She didn't need to. That smile again, curved like the edge of a polished knife. I looked at her, really looked, and I knew. I was done asking for recognition. What I wanted now was accuracy. A few minutes later, Marcus arrived, slightly out of breath. Sorry, traffic was a nightmare. I nodded. He looked at me for a long moment before asking, "Are we staying long?" Colton reappeared at my side, holding a miniature chocolate tart and sensing something off. He didn't say a word, just leaned against me. I smiled at both of them, even as my hands itched with restraint. "Not too long," I said quietly. But not yet. Because I wasn't finished watching, and when I made my move, they would feel it. I didn't leave the party that night. I walked deeper into it, because I wanted to remember everything. They never imagined that I was already building my exit in silence, with perfect clarity. I needed air. Not for my lungs, those were fine. I needed air for my mind. For my restraint. I stepped out onto the upper balcony, just past the side corridor, where the chatter of the ballroom faded beneath the rustle of manicured trees, lit by strings of soft antique bulbs. The garden below looked exactly as it had the night I pitched the Powell digitization proposal to Everett. That evening, I had outlined everything: automated delivery tracking, integrated inventory forecasts, AI-enhanced vendor matching. I'd worked on that plan for 6 weeks. What I got in return was one sentence. "Too much family overlap complicates liability. Let's keep this clean." Clean! As in, without me. I leaned against the railing, letting that word settle once more. And yet, months later, Cameron rolled out a near-identical solution. Same structure, same phrasing in the press release, only the author had changed. I never got a thank you. Just a smile from across the dinner table and a quiet understanding that once again, what was mine had been absorbed. I unlocked my phone, scrolled to the archived thread. The proposal I'd emailed Everett. The forwarded version to Cameron with my name omitted. The subject line hadn't even changed. I screenshot everything and sent it to Susan, my private attorney. Subject, just in case. I returned to the hallway just in time for Lorna to pull me aside. Her hands touched my forearm with performative delicacy. "You look tense," she said, eyes scanning the crowd instead of me. "I'm fine." "Well," she said, tone soft like syrup, "I just wanted you to know. We asked the event coordinator to list you as an advisor in the program, not founder." I paused. "Excuse me?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping just enough to make it feel private, but public enough to remind me we were still on her turf. "Founder sounds aggressive, sweetheart, especially next to Cameron. You know how some people respond to that kind of thing." I didn't answer. "We're just trying to make the evening smooth. Just wear what fits. That's all we ask." She patted my arm. A pat, like I was a dog who needed reminding where the fence was. I stepped back without another word. Inside, Cameron stood at the edge of a small circle of partners, laughing, gesturing. I didn't have to get closer to know what he was saying. I'd written the words. In every one of his new investor slide decks, there were phrases I coined. Scalable transparency, predictive logistics as competitive intelligence. I should have trademarked the damn language. Marcus found me by the bar. "That smile is gone," he said. "You okay?" I swirled the ice in my drink, watching Cameron shake hands like he was the next big thing. "I'm observing," I said. "I'm not done collecting data yet." Marcus nodded, reading between every syllable. He always did. "Do you need me to run interference?" "No, not tonight." I took a slow sip. "But I'll need you to authorize the transfer later this weekend. Quietly and fast." He tilted his head, not asking questions. "What changed?" "They erased me on paper," I said, "so I'll respond on paper." It wasn't rage. It wasn't vengeance. It was accounting. An emotional ledger finally hitting its line for collection. From the stage, someone made a joke about Cameron being the genius behind the family's tech leap. Laughter followed. Cameron winked at the crowd like a sitcom star. He really believed the role they cast him in. I glanced at Marcus again. You know what terrifies men like my brother? I asked. He raised a brow. A woman who keeps receipts and doesn't raise her voice. My smile wasn't one of joy, it was calibration. I excused myself and walked to the side conference room near the back exit, a space they'd reserved for staff rest breaks. I locked the door behind me, turned on the small desk lamp, and pulled out my backup drive. I didn't plan to use it tonight, but now it felt inevitable. I copied the final breach report, labeled it Powell Protocol V1, dated it, and transferred it to the encrypted cloud. Then I stood, adjusted my dress, and stepped back into the corridor. The storm hadn't hit yet, but I had just pulled the first cloud into place. By the time they stood to make toasts, I already knew how far I'd let them go. I wasn't waiting for recognition anymore. I was just counting offenses. Back in the ballroom, the crowd had thickened. The clinking of glasses, bursts of laughter, and the hollow sound of "we're so proud of him" scratched at my senses like static. I stood near a marble column, trying to blend into the floral arrangements that stretched taller than I did. People floated past me like I wasn't there, maybe they believed I wasn't supposed to be. A hand, well manicured and clutching a half-empty flute, waved in my direction. A man in a designer suit, someone I vaguely recognized from a prior investor, event beckoned me over without looking up. "The champagne's running low," he said. Then, without so much as a glance, he slipped a folded bill into my hand. It took me a beat to process what had just happened. I looked down. A $5 tip. Not a mistake. Not sarcasm. Just entitlement, unbothered and sincere. I held the bill between my fingers longer than I should have, then slipped it into my clutch, like it was a receipt for something I hadn't purchased, but now owned. I didn't correct him. I didn't explain who I was. I just walked away. I made a slow lap around the ballroom perimeter, trailing behind the conversations and flashes from phones. My parents were smiling at a cluster of people near the main table. Cameron was talking animatedly, gesturing with a cocktail napkin like he was presenting to a boardroom. Zinnia leaned against his arm, posed just right, letting the camera find her jawline. The picture was complete. So complete, in fact, that you wouldn't know someone was missing. Someone like me. I drifted toward the seating chart just to be sure. Dozens of names, organized by table number and last name. There was Cameron Witt, Everett and Lorna Powell, Zinnia Crane, even Maribel Knox, me closest friend from grad school, and someone I had invited personally. But my name wasn't there. Not in Powell, not in Shipman, not anywhere. I flagged down a coordinator in a sleek black suit and asked, as calmly as I could, "Can you help me find my assigned table?" She scrolled through her iPad, her smile faltering for half a second. "You're listed at table 12, Mom." She gestured across the ballroom. I followed her direction. When I arrived, I found Maribel sitting in what should have been my seat. She looked up, clearly confused. "I thought you were with us," she said, shifting slightly. "I was supposed to be," I replied, voice barely audible over the music. She looked genuinely apologetic. "They said the list changed last minute." I didn't know. I shook my head once. "It's not your fault." I didn't blame Maribel. I blamed whoever thought I wouldn't notice being erased again and assumed it'd still stay quiet. I walked out through the glass doors that opened to the back veranda. The air was cooler there, mercifully still. String lights swayed gently above the garden, casting soft glows on the manicured hedges below. From where I stood, I could hear the muffled applause for Cameron's next round of introductions. My fingers curled around the edge of the railing. You thought being good was enough. Being helpful, brilliant, thorough. You thought they'd see you eventually, that they'd make room. But they didn't want you to fit. They wanted you to disappear. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. Opened the encrypted folder labeled Contracts Strategic Withdrawal. Not yet, but soon. Behind me, the door opened. Marcus stepped out, spotting me immediately. He approached slowly, reading my face before he spoke. "You all right?" I didn't answer. I reached into my bag and handed him the folded $5 bill. He raised a brow. "What's this?" They tipped me, I said. He blinked. Who did? Does it matter? I tucked my phone away. They all did. For years. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. Are we at the point? I looked out over the glowing hedges and the night that had turned on its axis. Not yet, I said quietly. But the glass is full. One more drop and it spills. I didn't tip the glass. I watched them pour into it until they overflowed themselves. The room didn't know it yet, but they had just given me the last drop I needed. Somewhere near the lounge, a catering manager stepped into my path like she'd drawn a short straw. She was polite, gentle, even, but her tone held a strange edge of urgency. Miss Shipman, she said softly. Miss Crane asked if you could assist with coordinating the transition for the toast segment. She extended a clipboard toward me with practiced grace. My name was printed clearly beneath a bold heading that read Logistics Support. I stared at it for a long second, said nothing, then folded it in half, creasing the cardboard with quiet precision. I slipped it into my clutch. That was all. I didn't ask questions. I didn't raise my voice, because the answer was already written on Cameron's face the moment I found him near the sidebar. He knew it'd come. Well, look who's finally circulating. He grinned, swirling his whiskey. You good, Ro? I didn't bother matching his tone. Was that your idea? I held my clutch tighter, feeling the sharp corner of the folded clipboard press into my palm. Which one? He asked, a little too quickly. Assigning me to help manage flow tonight? Or do I get to guess? Cameron tilted his head, still smiling, still performing. You've always been good at logistics. You're the one who makes things run. Thought it made sense. Besides, this stuff's kinda your wheelhouse, isn't it? Do not test the limit of my grace, Cameron. I didn't whisper it, but I didn't raise it either. The volume landed just enough for the two guests lingering near us to glance away. His smile dropped, just a hair. Then don't act like you've been wronged. You're making this harder than it has to be. I stepped back, but didn't break eye contact. If this continues, I won't stay quiet. I won't stay kind. That earned me a chuckle, low and dismissive. You always were the dramatic one. No, I thought. I always had receipts, and I was done hiding them. Not long after, the tech demo began. Projectors lit up the ceiling with animated flows of guests through the venue, color-coded in real time. A digital floor plan responded to movement, mapping activity with smooth transitions. I knew every line of code. My team had built the AI from scratch to predict crowd behavior and adjust lighting, temperature, and sound in sync. It was Nexus. All of it. And yet, not a single credit line appeared. No watermark. No mention. Then, Lorna Flawless and camera ready was handed a microphone by the coordinator. She smiled brightly, doing her best impression of humility. Well, Cameron always had a great sense for innovation, she said. He found the right tools to make tonight's event truly seamless. I didn't move. I stood near the back wall, far from the spotlight, but my heart didn't race. I wasn't shaken, I was cataloging. Marcus found me a few minutes later, his jaw tight, eyes already narrowing. I just saw the demo, he said, his voice low. That's your entire system, your patents, your dev cycle. Did they even license it? I shook my head once. You built the infrastructure. You paid for early-stage R&D. You got them here and they used it like it belonged to them? They used me, I corrected, because I never made them pay the first time. Marcus rubbed his jaw. And this time, I took out my phone, typed a quick message, and hit send. This time, I invoice in silence with consequence. The message was for Celine, my head of engineering. A simple note. Begin drafting phase-out plan. Assume 48-hour timeline. I could feel Marcus watching me. What are you doing? I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the Nexus admin app and reviewed the live data one more time, every line of code humming behind the visuals in the ballroom. My company was running this entire experience, down to the scent in the air. And yet, to this crowd, I was invisible. If they only used my name behind closed doors, I'd make sure they felt it outside those doors. I locked the screen, took one slow breath, and looked Marcus dead in the eyes. "They think the silence is weakness," I said, "but silence is just the space before thunder." The next applause wasn't just stolen, it was weaponized. They thought stripping my name from the system would take my power with it. They were wrong. The room darkened slightly, just enough to signal the transition from cocktails to curated speeches. The stage lit up like a Broadway set spotlights, a polished podium, branded signage glowing in soft gold. I stayed near the back, invisible by design now. Cameron took center stage in his tailored suit like he was born to wear it. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice already trained in its rhythm. "This evening isn't just about good food and familiar faces. It's about the future ours. It's about honoring legacy while embracing innovation." He paused for emphasis, and I could have written the beats for him. Hell, I had. The words embracing innovation, scalable intelligence, vision for a better Powell Estates were pulled directly from my early strategy decks. I could have closed my eyes and still recited his speech along with him. Our new tech integrations, inspired by best-in-class logistics partners, are already changing how we build and connect. Not powered by Nexus, not developed by my sister, just inspired. My mother nodded from the front row. Zinnia placed her hand gently on Cameron's wrist, like a well-timed signal. Guests leaned in, smiling, charmed. They clapped before he even reached the ending. Applause rang out loud and fast. Laughter sprinkled like confetti. I didn't blink. Then came Everett, my father. He walked to the stage with that careful steadiness that made people think he was still in charge. Still sharp, still deliberate. "It's time we formalize the next phase of Powell Estates," he said, voice calm, like he was making a toast instead of passing a torch. "Tonight, I'm proud to announce that effective this quarter, 40% equity in Powell Estates will transfer to Cameron." I didn't move. "A leader with the right temperament," he added, turning slightly toward the crowd. "A man of vision and humility." Guests stood. They clapped again. A ceremonial folder was handed to Cameron Thick, gold-trimmed, symbolic. And my name? Not a syllable. I turned and walked toward the service hall that looped behind the ballroom. In the quiet corridor, I found Marcus. He looked at me like he already knew. "They've taken everything I built," I said softly, and fed it to a myth. He didn't try to comfort me. He just held my hand, firmly. My phone buzzed. A message from an old client. Attached was a screen grab from an online press release. Cameron Witt, named architect behind Powell Tech Integration, powered by Nexus. My picture had been replaced by his. I said nothing. I just opened my encrypted folder. Redline protocol. The file pulsed on the screen. One button to upload, one to schedule the first notice. I didn't press it yet. I walked calmly toward the staging hallway and caught the AV manager just before she returned to her post. After the next toast, I said gently, "Dim the house lights. Full fade. Call it a guest queue. You'll know when." She nodded, professional and unquestioning. Back inside, I returned to my table. Everett locked eyes with me across the room and then looked away like the air between us had teeth. Zinnia smiled from beside him, radiant and certain. The folder in Cameron's hands gleamed under the light. I lifted my glass and turned to Marcus. They gave Cameron my applause, my title, my legacy, and then they looked surprised when I responded like a CEO. The lights dimmed. The room clapped. But they hadn't heard the last word yet. Mine was still coming. Colton tugged at my hand, his fingers curling into my palm as the last toast ended. He leaned close, voice barely audible, beneath the sound of glasses clinking and music rising again. "Are you a guest too, Mom?" he asked. They didn't call you up, like they did everyone else. It was the kind of question kids ask without understanding the fracture it can create. I froze. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because no answer would make it right. I pulled him closer, kissed the top of his head. He shouldn't have noticed. I had tried to protect him from all of this. It hoped the mask of celebration would distract him, but even at 12, he saw through it. I swallowed my own bitterness and smiled. Let's find Marcus. We didn't get far. An investor-some New York suit with an empty smile intercepted us halfway to the veranda. Your assistant's been fantastic tonight, he said to Marcus, clapping him on the shoulder like they were old friends. Really composed under pressure. Marcus tilted his head. She's not my assistant. The man blinked. She's the founder of Nexus Origins. I didn't flinch. I extended my hand. Nice to meet you, I said. We specialize in supply chain solutions and clarity. He shook my hand stiffly, murmured something about scheduling a follow-up, and vanished. I didn't look at Marcus. I didn't need to. Instead, I turned on my heel and walked deliberate, focused toward the hallway leading to the coat room. It was quieter there, dimmer. The buzz of champagne and congratulations faded behind me. I pulled out my phone and opened the Execute Termination Protocol file. My thumb hovered over the Confirm button. Then I pressed it. No second-guessing, no dramatic flourish. Within seconds, encrypted notices were dispatched to legal and ops termination procedures initiated, a digital chain reaction now in motion. I slipped the phone back into my purse, exhaled once, then caught sight of myself in the mirror. No tears. Just eyes that no longer needed permission to stare back. I remembered their voices from years ago. Not arguments, just soft, sharp things that became walls over time. You're difficult. You overthink everything. Maybe try blending in more. Each one a paper cut. Each one framed as advice, but meant to reshape me into something easier to control. I had internalized those phrases once. Tonight, they built the scaffolding of my resolve. I didn't see a woman breaking in that reflection. I saw a woman who was finished shrinking. I returned to Marcus and Colton. He was holding 2 waters. I took one. It's done, I said. All of it? Legals notified. Systems will begin rollback in 36 hours. They'll scramble. Let them. Marcus nodded. He didn't offer a hug or words. He just stood beside me, as he always had, not in front, not behind. We walked together past the chandelier, where Zinnia posed with a new donor. Past the polished floor, where Cameron shook hands like a crowned prince. Past my mother, who was laughing too hard at something Everett clearly hadn't said. No one noticed we were leaving, but they would feel it, because for the first time tonight, I wasn't reacting. I was directing. They'd made a show of celebrating their legacy, now they'd watch it recalculate in real time. The silence I left behind was louder than any toast they gave. I walked calmly toward the main exit, weaving past guests who were still mingling, still sipping what they thought was victory. My heels barely made a sound against the tile, but inside my chest, the pounding was steady and deliberate. Every step was measured. No theatrics, no speech. Just an ending quiet and final. Near the coat room, I found a seat tucked behind a column, out of the way, but still within view of the valet foyer. I pulled my phone from my clutch. No shaking fingers, no hesitation. I opened the encrypted file marked Termination Protocol Powell Bradford Holdings. The message was already written. All that remained was one swipe to send. Effective immediately. Nexus Technologies is terminating all service and integration agreements with Powell Bradford Holdings. Full rollback and data offboarding will commence in 72 hours. I read it once. Then again. Then I sent it. That was it. No ceremony, no fireworks. Just a simple transfer of digital power, a contract withdrawal so quietly executed, no one in that ballroom would even know yet that their lights, logistics, and event scaffolding were built on tech that now had an expiration date. Seconds later, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my father. At first, I thought it was meant for me. Then I saw the recipient line. Family group chat. Don't worry, she won't dare. She never does. The sentence sat on the screen like a match thrown into dry grass. I didn't flinch. I forwarded the message to my lawyer with a single note. Add to motive archive. Timestamp included. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Crisp, quick, familiar. Gwen. Everett's voice came before he even turned the corner. Lorna, Cameron, and Zinnia weren't far behind. "What have you done?" he asked. Not loud, but not whispering either. I didn't stand. I looked up from the bench like I was reading a menu. "I sent a message," I said. "You'll receive the rest in writing." Zinnia rolled her eyes, laughing like it was all absurd. "You're being dramatic." I turned to her directly, calm as marble. "You were always better at optics than operations, Zinnia." Her laugh died in her throat. Cameron stepped forward, hands open. "Ro, let's not make this personal." I almost smiled. "It's never been anything but personal," I replied. "You just hoped I wouldn't notice." I rose slowly, gathering my purse. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply left them there, suspended in the moment, before impact. Outside, the air was cooler. The sound of jazz from the reception faded as I stepped into the courtyard. Jasper Maynard stood near the fountain, phone in hand. He looked up as I approached. "Miss Shipman," he said, voice lower than before. "I'd like to schedule a meeting. Just you and me this time." I nodded once. No need to gloat. No need to correct him again. Behind me, Everett's voice rose, sharp and clipped. Something about damage control. Another round of legacy unspooling in real time. I walked away, not in anger, not in triumph, but in clarity. Marcus was already waiting by the car. Colton sat inside, eyes wide with curiosity, but too smart to ask questions right now. As I slid in, he looked at me. "Are you okay, Mom?" I met his gaze. "I am now." We drove off in silence. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel finished. But I felt free. Free from the obligation to belong to people who never saw me. Free from explaining why I stayed so long. Free from pretending I owed them anything for surviving their erasure. Not all endings are explosions. Some are decisions that no longer beg for applause. Morning light didn't bring relief, but it brought certainty. And I knew exactly what came next. I stood barefoot in the kitchen of my apartment in Austin, hands wrapped around a mug that had nothing left in it but heat. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. No phone calls, no emails opened. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the slow movement of Sunday morning. Colton sat at the dining table, still in his pajamas, tapping a pencil rhythmically against the side of his cereal bowl. He glanced at me, but didn't say much. "You did great last night," I said. He nodded, not looking up. My voice cracked not from sadness, but from the realization that I no longer had to pretend everything was fine. He had seen enough. But more importantly, so had I. By noon, the first email arrived. Susan confirmed that Powell Bradford had received our formal termination notice. She'd reviewed every clause, every timeline, every dotted line. Everything was airtight. A second message from Everett's law office followed. Polite in tone, firm in content. Everett requested an in-person conversation to discuss mutual consequences. I declined. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was reckoning. There were no more family dinners to salvage. No more gentle phrases to soften betrayal. I sent a single-line reply. "This isn't a negotiation. It's aftermath." The rest of the day passed in intervals of stillness. I opened the windows, let in the breeze. I didn't check the group chat. I didn't scroll through LinkedIn to read the inevitable spin. Jasper Maynard emailed later that afternoon. Subject, clarity and next steps. He wrote that he appreciated my professionalism, admired my restraint, and would like to schedule a demo with Nexus that puts your voice back at the center of the conversation. It wasn't a compliment. It was a correction, and it was enough for now. Maribel's voicemail came that night. "I'm so sorry, Ro," she said. "I should have seen it sooner. I just thought if they treated you like that, maybe it wasn't what I thought it was. But I know now. I do. I didn't return the call. Not because I was angry. I just didn't need more explanations. Sometimes listening was enough." Monday morning, I sat at my desk and opened an email with no subject line from Lorna. Just 4 words. We didn't mean to. I read them 5 times. They didn't sting. They didn't soothe. They just were. I printed it, folded it carefully, placed it inside a folder marked Unfinished Business, and slid it into the bottom drawer. Maybe someday, I'd reply. Maybe not. By Wednesday, our team had already briefed the new investors. I led the onboarding call with quiet confidence. The team laughed at a joke I barely tried to make. Not because it was funny, but because they were relieved. They trusted that I was back, and they no longer had to tiptoe around the fracture they all felt. After the call, I walked out onto my balcony. Austin stretched beneath mimosy, imperfect, real. I thought about the long wooden dining table my father commissioned years ago, the one that supposedly anchored our family. I had spent years waiting to be offered a seat at it. They wrote me out. I rewrote myself. I don't need a family table. I'm building my own damn house. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is walk away. I used to think being needed was the same as being valued, that if I worked hard enough, proved myself enough, stayed quiet enough, eventually, they'd see me. But the truth is, when people benefit from your silence, they will never ask you to speak. This wasn't just a story about a contract. It was about dignity, about reclaiming the right to define your own worth without waiting for someone else to validate it. So if you're watching this and you've ever been overlooked, misjudged, or used, I hope this reminds you that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet decision, signed in confidence, and backed by clarity. You don't have to make a scene to make an impact. You just have to stop asking permission to exist. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family, job, or community? What moment made you finally say, enough? Drop a comment below and share your experience. I read everyone. If this story touched something in you, type 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate, I still want to hear why. Your perspective matters. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. Because around here, we don't just tell stories, we pass the torch. Thank you for being here.